Hello everyone, welcome back to SteamCode, and welcome to the first episode of our RESTful API in Python tutorial series. Now, I'm going to begin this series with first explaining what is a RESTful API and what types of details you need to adhere to this architectural style, and then I'll move on to the code for how you can actually get started. So if you want to skip the part of the explanation, if you already know what a RESTful API is, you can skip that section of the video and just jump straight into the code. But for those of you who want a little refresher, a RESTful API is an API which stands for Application Programming Interface that conforms to the design principles of REST, which means representational state transfer. So basically, it's a set of rules on how two computer systems can communicate over the internet in basic terms. So, what are the rules for how it can communicate? So the first rule is that there must be a client-server architecture. So the client needs to be separate from the server, and this allows both the client and the server to change independently. So what will be the client? The client might be your web browser, it might be a mobile app, or the server could be anything that stores the data. So it's just some other computer that data is stored on, or some other service that data is stored on. So the client, the one that makes the calls, and the server, the one that handles them, are two completely different things. The next rule that it must adhere to is the rule of statelessness. So basically, every request from the client to the server must contain all the information the server needs to understand and process the request. What that means is that if the client makes a request to the server should not have to look at previous requests that the client made in order to understand or process this current request. It shouldn't store the state of the client. Every request should be independent and fully processable by the server. Now, the next quality that must be adhered to is that it must be cacheable. So client should be able to cache responses. This means that if a resource hasn't changed, the client can use the stored version instead of making a completely new request to the server. So if you previously received information from the server, you should be able to use that information from the server as long as you want to, as long as the actual resource hasn't changed. And then you need a layered session. So the client needs to be able to connect to the end server through intermediate servers without the client needing to know it. And so this would enhance your security and scalability of the entire program. And lastly, you need a uniform interface. So you need individual resources that are defined by URLs. Or they don't need to be defined by URLs, but typically they are. And then you need to be able to manipulate your resource via, say, a JSON file, and you need to have enough information to modify or delete that resource as you see put. And then each message should also be able to have enough information to describe how to process that said message. And so this often involves HTTP. If you're making a RESTful API, you're usually using HTTP methods. And then the server should also respond, including links to other relevant sources, guiding the client on what it can do next. And that's known as hypermedia as the engine of application state. Okay, so that's what a RESTful API is. Now let's get on to how to make your first RESTful API using Python. So I'll be using the fastapi library. So in order to install the fastapi library, you'll need both Python and pip. If you don't know how to get both Python and pip, go to python.com, install it, and get it onto your computer, and you can do the same via pip. And I'll also be using Visual Studio Code as my IDE, so if you'd like to follow exactly what I'm doing, install Visual Studio Code as well. To ensure that you have both Python and VS Code installed, you can check their versions, or Python and pip installed, you can check their versions. So Python -- version, you can see the Python version right there, and then pip -- version, and there's the pip version. So first you'll want to install the fastapi resource. So pip install fastapi, then in quotations say UVI corn bracket standard. Once that's installed, just create a main.py file in whatever directory you'd like, and we can begin with a basic hello world API. So you can say from fastapi import fastapi. Then let's define our API. So app is equal to fastapi parentheses. So that's our API object or our app. Now let's define a get method. So this get method will be on the basic URL. So we'll say @app.get. So this means that anything we define here will run when the user processes a GET request to this URL. So let's define a function, define read_root, and let's just return hello world. So return hello world. So what does this do? Every time the user sends a GET request to this URL, it will return hello world. So now let's actually run this API. So type UVI corn main : app -- reload. Now I'll be doing it on a different port. This will automatically start on port 8000. I'll be doing it on port 8080. So if you want to change your port, do -- port and then the port number. So once the application is started, you can navigate to the URL. So localhost, port, and then whatever port that you set. I set 8088. And then I'll show you my response here. Bring it over here. You can see I went to port 8088. And we see hello world. Alright, so that's how you create a very basic fastapi in Python. And I will show you how to add more features to this RESTful API in future tutorials. If you enjoyed, please leave a comment, please press like, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for being here.